Welcome to Nemesis. Nemesis. True crime. True crime. Welcome to Nemesis.
Hi friends, my name is Sasha and welcome to Nemesis True Crime. And yes, I am a real person. In a world full of AI generated content, I want you to know there is a real woman behind this microphone who genuinely cares about every single case we cover here. This week, we are covering the case of Gareth Williams, a brilliant British spy, found naked, padlocked inside a red sports bag, in his own bathtub, a man whose employers took 10 days to notice he was missing, a man whose death was ruled both unlawful killing and an accident, depending on who you ask, a man whose questions have never truly been answered. This is my very first episode, and it means the world to me that you're here. If you enjoy what you hear today, please subscribe and leave me a comment below. It truly makes a difference to a brand new channel, and I would love to build this community with you. Now let's get into it. There is a red North Face holdall sitting in an empty bathtub in a first floor flat in Pimlico, London. It is zipped up. It is padlocked from the outside. Inside, there is a man, naked, curled into himself like he was trying to take up as little space as possible in this world. He has been there for over a week. Nobody came looking. His name was Gareth Williams. He was 31 years old. He was one of the most gifted codebreakers Britain had ever produced. He worked for MI6. He had 2 passports, a new identity in the making, and knowledge that certain very powerful people would have preferred stayed locked inside his head. Whether it did or it didn't, we may never know. Because the man who could have told us was found in a bag, in a bath, with a padlock that had none of his fingerprints on it. And the people who employed him waited 10 days to raise the alarm. This is the story of Gareth Williams, and nothing about it is simple. Nothing about it is clean. And 14 years later, not a single person has been held accountable for his death. To understand what happened to Gareth Williams, you first need to understand who he was before the headlines got hold of him. Gareth Wynne Williams was born on the 26th of September 1978 in Valley, a small town on the Isle of Anglesey, off the northern tip of Wales. He was a Welsh speaker, a country boy, close to his family, and by all accounts, quietly extraordinary. His maths teacher at Boderdon Secondary School said he was probably the best logician he had ever taught. Not just talented, not just gifted, the best. And here's the thing that should stop you in your tracks. While Gareth was still attending secondary school, he was already studying mathematics part-time at Bangor University. He graduated with a first-class degree at 17 years old. Let that just land for a moment. 17 years old. By 18, he had started his PhD at Manchester University. This was not a man who stumbled into intelligence work. This was a man who was built for it. A brain that the British government spotted early and decided they wanted. He was also, by every account from people who actually knew him, gentle, modest. He had a peculiarly memorable laugh. He loved cycling, history, Japanese manga, art. He went home to Anglesey to see his parents, Ian and Ellen, as often as he could. His Uncle William said he was very, very talented, and that the family knew never to ask about his work. He never spoke about it. Not once. That kind of silence, when you're 31 years old and your family loves you, takes discipline, or fear, or both. In 2000, he went to St Catherine's College, Cambridge, for a postgraduate certificate in mathematics, but left before completing it. Shortly after, GCHQ came calling, Britain's most secretive listening post, the place where codes are broken and signals are intercepted, and nobody talks about what happens inside. Gareth said yes. Of course he did. What else does a boy like that do with a brain like that? He spent years at GCHQ in Cheltenham, quiet, dedicated, never missing a day. Then in 2009, something shifted. He was seconded to MI6, a step up, a step deeper, into a world where the rules are different and the stakes are considerably higher. And that is where our story really begins. In 2009, Gareth Williams was seconded from GCHQ to MI6. On paper, it sounds like a promotion. In reality, it was an entirely different world. MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, the organisation that inspired James Bond. Except the reality is nothing like the films. There are no car chases and cocktails. There is surveillance. There is data. There is encryption. And there are secrets so heavy that the people who carry them are never quite the same again. Gareth was based at a government flat on Alderney Street in Pimlico, London, a top-floor flat in what a neighbour described as a very mixed area of bankers and politicians. He was on a 3-year secondment. He was, by all accounts, doing well. But something was happening beneath the surface. 8 months before his death, Gareth told his childhood friend and confidant, Sian Lloyd-Jones, something that should have set alarm bells ringing. He told her he was learning a new identity. MI6 had given him a second passport. He was preparing for an undercover operation, the details of which have never been made public. Let that sink in for a moment. A man being trained to become someone else entirely. A man whose real name, real face, and real expertise were being tucked away behind a cover story. A man who knew things, important things, the kind of things that don't appear in any file you or I will ever be able to read. He also told his MI 6-line manager that he wanted to leave. He was getting bogged down in bureaucracy, he said. He wanted out. A man who wants to leave MI6, who has a second identity, who is preparing for an undercover operation, who is a codebreaker with access to classified intelligence. That man turns up dead 8 months later, and his employer waited 10 days to raise the alarm. I'll let you sit with that. Gareth Williams was last seen alive on the 16th of August 2010. He didn't turn up to work the next day. Nobody raised the alarm. The day after that, nothing. The day after that, still nothing. A week passed. 7 days. And the organisation that employed one of Britain's most gifted codebreakers did absolutely nothing. 10 days after Gareth was last seen, colleagues finally contacted police. Not MI6 as an institution making an urgent call. Colleagues, individually, because they were worried. A police officer was sent to the flat on Alderney Street in Pimlico. He let himself in with a spare key. The curtains were drawn. The flat was immaculate, tidy to the point of being unsettling. Everything in its place, except Gareth. He was in the bathroom. Now here is where I need you to really think about this, because the timeline matters enormously. Gareth is believed to have died in the early hours of the 16th of August. His body wasn't discovered until the 23rd. That is 7 days. In a bag. In a bath. In a London flat. In August. The state of his body when he was found meant that a post-mortem could not determine a cause of death. The decomposition was too advanced. Think about what that means for a moment. If someone, anyone, had raised the alarm even 2 or 3 days earlier, we might have answers today. We might know exactly how he died. We might know if someone else was in that flat. But we don't, because nobody came. His MI6 line manager, known only as Witness G to protect his identity, later told the inquest that when Gareth didn't show up, he assumed he was stuck on a train. Stuck on a train. He then said, and I quote, "In hindsight, knowing what I know now, should I have taken action? Absolutely." A man with a new identity, preparing for an undercover operation, doesn't show up to one of the most secretive intelligence agencies in Britain, and his boss thinks he's stuck on a train. You can decide what you make of that. When police entered that flat on Alderney Street, what they found painted a picture that has never fully made sense, no matter how many times you look at it. The flat was neat, ordered, almost staged in its tidiness, but there were details that jarred. A cutting from the Observer newspaper about the top 5 regrets of the dying had been left out. In the bedroom, clothes were folded carefully on the bed, but a bathrobe and a duvet cover were strewn across the floor. The coroner herself described that as incongruous, in an otherwise immaculate flat. And then there was the bathroom. In the empty bathtub sat a large red North Face sports holdall, zipped up, a brass padlock threading through both zip eyelets, locked from the outside. Inside was Gareth, naked, curled into a fetal position, and had been there for 7 days. Now here is where the evidence gets deeply, deeply uncomfortable. There was not a single fingerprint from Gareth on that padlock. Not one. His palm prints were not found on the rim of the bathtub either. If Gareth had climbed into that bag himself, he would have had to have supported his own weight on the rim of the bath as he lowered himself in. The absence of his prints there is not a small detail. It is enormous. Forensic experts actually tested whether it was physically possible for a person to lock themselves inside that bag from the inside. A yoga expert attempted it and could not replicate it, could not do it. But that is not all. On the zip toggle and the padlock, police found something, 2 minor components of DNA from another person, unexplained, unidentified. To this day, nobody knows who that DNA belongs to. The lead detective, Detective Chief Inspector Jackie Sabaya, was unequivocal. She said it was her opinion, from the moment she walked into that scene, that a third party had been involved in Gareth's death. A third party.
I've always been satisfied that a third party may have been involved in his death, and the coroner has confirmed that in her finding today.
And then there was what else they found in that flat. Around £20,000 worth of women's designer clothing and shoes. A red wig. Makeup. His computer search history showed visits to bondage websites, claustrophilia sites, sadomasochism forums. And this is where the narrative started to shift, because suddenly the story wasn't about a missing spy with a second identity and an undercover operation. Suddenly, the story was about a man with a secret life, a man who perhaps locked himself into a bag as some kind of sexual game that went tragically wrong. Convenient, isn't it? His family rejected every single one of those claims. His friends said the women's clothing was likely gifts. A shop assistant confirmed he regularly bought women's items, saying they were for his girlfriend, though he never mentioned her name. His sister suggested the clothes were possibly intended as presents. Nobody who actually knew Gareth Williams recognised the man being described in those headlines. And 3 years before his death, his landlady in Cheltenham found him tied to his own bed in the middle of the night, in his boxer shorts, unable to free himself. She believed it was sexually motivated. He claimed he was testing whether he could escape. Was he practicing escapology, or was someone even then trying to understand his limits? I'll leave that with you. So, what actually happened to Gareth Williams? The honest answer is, nobody knows. Or at least, nobody who knows is telling. But let's walk through what we do know and what has been suggested. Because the truth, if it exists anywhere, is buried somewhere in here. Theory 1. It was an accident. This is the Metropolitan Police's official position, that Gareth, alone in his flat, climbed into that bag, padlocked it from the inside, and suffocated. An accident. Nobody else present. Nobody else involved. Except the yoga expert couldn't replicate it. His prints weren't on the padlock. His palm prints weren't on the bath rim. And there was someone else's DNA on the lock. The Metropolitan Police looked at all of that evidence and still called it an accident. You can decide what you make of that. Theory 2. It was a sexual game gone wrong. That someone was with Gareth that night, consensually, and something went terribly wrong. That the person panicked, wiped the flat, and left. It's possible. It cannot be entirely ruled out. But it doesn't explain the 10-day silence from MI6. It doesn't explain the second passport. It doesn't explain the undercover operation that has never been named. And it doesn't explain why the establishment moved so quickly to make this about Gareth's personal life rather than his professional one. Theory 3. He was silenced. That Gareth Williams knew something, had accessed something, had seen something that made him a liability, that his death was deliberate, professional, and covered up. There are people who believe Russian intelligence was involved. Gareth worked in cyber intelligence and counter-terrorism at a time when state-sponsored hacking was becoming one of the most dangerous weapons in the world. He was, by all accounts, exceptionally good at what he did. One report suggested he may have accessed files relating to a Clinton political donor, files he had no authorization to view. Whether that is true, and what the consequences of that might have been, has never been officially confirmed. But here is what we know for certain. The coroner, Fiona Wilcox, looked at the evidence in 2012 and concluded on the balance of probabilities that Gareth Williams was unlawfully killed, murdered, by person or persons unknown. A year later, the Metropolitan Police reviewed the same case and said it was probably an accident. The coroner said murder. The police said accident. Nobody was charged. Nobody was prosecuted. The file sits open, gathering dust, while Gareth's family in Anglesey have never had a single answer that makes sense. And there is one final detail that I cannot get out of my head. MI6 knew this man. They gave him a new identity. They were preparing him for an undercover operation. They knew his habits, his schedule, his movements. And they waited 10 days. 10 days. Either they didn't notice, which given what they do for a living, is almost impossible to believe, or they did notice, and they waited anyway. Both of those possibilities should horrify you. Gareth Williams deserved better than headlines about bags and bondage. He deserved an investigation that wasn't hamstrung by national security concerns and institutional silence. He deserved justice. He is still waiting for it. Before I go, I want to take a moment, not for the spy, not for the headline, not for the bag, for Gareth. Gareth Wynne Williams was a quiet boy from a small town on an island off the coast of Wales. He spoke Welsh as his first language. He made his family proud in ways most of us can only dream of. He went home to Anglesey whenever he could, because that's where his heart was, with his mum and dad, with the people who loved him before the world knew his name. He served his country in silence, in secret, carrying knowledge and responsibilities that most of us will never understand. And when he needed his country to come looking for him, they waited 10 days. A man who serves in any capacity, who gives himself to something bigger than himself, deserves better than to be left without answers. And his family, his parents, Ian and Ellen, his sister, the people who raised that extraordinary boy in Valley Anglesey, they deserve better than silence. They are still waiting. 14 years later, still waiting. I find that sickening. And I think you do too, which is why you're here. Gareth didn't have a voice at the end, so today, this was mine, for him. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on our very first episode of Nemesis True Crime. If this meant something to you, please subscribe, leave a comment, share it with someone who asks questions, because that's why I'm here, to be the voice they don't have. Keep safe and I'll see you next time. I hope you have enjoyed this first ever Nemesis video. If you have, please subscribe, it's free and would really help me out. Also hit the notification bell, then you will know when a new release goes out. Thank you again, have a lovely week and keep safe.
We will meet next time. We will meet next time. We will meet next time.